A recall election in California. To some political scientists, it's highly flawed. We talk about how recalls work and what can be done to improve the process here in California. And in just a couple of weeks, California's eviction moratorium is set to expire, potentially leaving thousands of people facing the loss of their homes. And housing assistance provided by the state has been slow in arriving. We look at what could happen next to those whose finances have been crushed by the pandemic. Every 10 years, the U.S. Census gives us a chance to look at where the population has shifted. That leads to the redrawing of district lines from national to local areas. And it includes our local LA school district. We take a look at how those lines are drawn as Fox 11 News In Depth starts right now. Hello, everyone. I'm Hal Eisner. California is fresh from a political upheaval this past week as Governor Gavin Newsom managed to stay in his governor's chair and not get the boot. But that attempt has brought attention to this recall process in California, a process that in some ways makes it unique among states here in the country and not necessarily in a good way. Joining us right now is Mindy Romero. Dr. Romero is the director of the Center for Inclusive Democracy at the USC Price School. And thanks for being with us. But first I want to tell you, and I want to tell everybody, that two Democrats who head committees that deal with elections and the state constitution, State Senator Steve Glazer and Assemblyman Mark Berman, issued a joint statement saying that the recall system put in place 110 years ago is broken and needs to be fixed. They're promising hearings and hope for a proposal during the 2022 legislative session. And Dr. Berman, I want to ask you what your thoughts are about that.
Well, it's not a surprise. I think there's been a lot of speculation about, what should be done or with the recall, especially given the high, $270+ million of taxpayer money that's gone forward for this election. And quite frankly, it's also a great political opportunity, right, for anyone to step in and take right off the bat, right, when it's fresh on everyone's minds, voters' minds, to take a leadership role to put this forward. But the bottom line is it's not up to the legislature or any set of individual elected officials, no matter how well intended. It'll be ultimately up to the voters. We put forth as a ballot initiative and then a subsequent vote. It's part of our Constitution, so it's not an easy thing to change. But we're one of 19 states that have a recall process. Not every state does, and we're one of the easiest ones to put a recall on the ballot.
How would that work, though, if the two legislators who head these powerful committees are encouraging hearings? That can be done for anything, but are hoping for a proposal to look at in 2022. How does that sort of jive with the notion of a resolution from the public?
Well, I don't know the exact what they said it's going to be their pathway going forward with this, of course. But I mean, I think there's certainly a role for leadership to have conversations around what this should look like. But ultimately, because it is currently 110+ years, this has been part of our Constitution, the ability to have a recall attempt on a governor. That's something that the voters will have to address. And to get to what exactly that should look like, I think there's going to be a lot of debate. Is the threshold, the 12% threshold, right? The number of signatures that are required. We're also one of the lowest thresholds. Should it be raised? Should the idea that there's a question 1 and a question 2, and there's only a plurality of votes required for question 2, should that be changed, right, to a majority? Should you separate out the recall election itself for the governor? Let the lieutenant governor, for instance, take that position and then maybe separately have a vote on a replacement. There's lots of different ways that this could go. I'm not quite sure the political reality in the end in terms of what the voters actually will be looking at. But certainly there's a lot of conversation, I think, that's quite understandable in the light of this election, and again, particularly because of the public cost around this.
Yeah, I think it was north of 270 million or whatever, but it was a lot of money. And I remember being at the polls and asking people what their position was as they were coming out of the polls. And one woman was talking about, we've got to get rid of the homelessness. We've got to get rid of this. We've got to fix our roads. Where's our money going? And it ran through my mind, well, $200 million might be able to be used for something. So that went toward the recall. Recall is a necessary thing in a state. You have to be able to move people out that maybe shouldn't be in office. But, that's a lot of money to have to deal with. And I wanted to ask you this. I don't know if everybody that might be watching really understands that if a sitting officer gets 49%, doesn't get over the 50% threshold, but one of the wannabes gets as little as, say, 20%, and that's 20% of the vote of those people that are supporting those, in this case, Republican candidates, then a leader can be chosen from a very small group of voters. And so how is that viewed in your mind and in the minds of the sort of the academicians?
Yeah, I mean, it's a question in terms of our democracy, right? Again, right now, it's legal. There hasn't been any manipulation around that. But you end up having, and we were faced with that being a very real reality in this recall, a sliver of the population potentially selecting the next governor, right? Because it is a plurality, it's not a majority. And as a matter of fact, if you look at the numbers thus far, about 9 million plus ballots that have been counted, because we're still getting ballots that are coming in through the mail. Only about half of those voters actually voted on the second question, right? So the fears kind of came true in that sense around that vote being a much smaller sliver of the population. And then because in this particular recall, Gavin Newsom strongly encouraged his voters not to vote on that second question, then we knew that not only were we going to be looking at a smaller proportion of the voting electorate, right, actually voting on that second question, but that it was going to be skewed politically in one direction over another. And that on top of the fact that whenever you have a lower turnout election, this is going to be much higher than many of us had expected, which is great for democracy, but it's still going to be lower, considering the consequences of this race, than a general election, for instance. On top of that, you just have less participation and less representation in the electorate.
We only have about a minute left, but I have to throw this in. One who really knows about recalls is former Governor Gray Davis. Back in 2003, Governor Davis faced a recall election that he lost. He lost his position and was replaced by Arnold Schwarzenegger. He spoke to us about the flaws in California's recall process and how he thinks it should be fixed. Take a listen.
This is a Russian roulette, this current recall process. And sure as we're talking, some governor will get 48%. His or her successor will get, pick a number, 39 or 40%. So the person with the least votes gets to be governor. That is not fair. I'm saying eliminate question one. Question two is, who do you want to finish the governor's term? And if the governor wins, it's him. If it's not, he's recalled, and whoever gets the most votes replaces him. That way, everybody is treated equally. Everybody has a decent chance to be elected.
A little bit what we were talking about. We only have about 30 seconds left. Just a real thought here, a real short thought about what Governor Davis had to say.
Well, I think it makes sense, right? Not only from his personal experience, but again, he's really echoing what a lot of people are saying today about, potential revisions around the recall election.
All right, Dr. Mindy Romero, thank you very much. Good to see you. We'll see you again. And coming up next on Fox 11 News In Depth, the expiration of the eviction moratorium at the end of this month could create a major housing crisis for thousands of tenants in California. We look at the options right after the break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Fox 11 News In Depth. I'm Hal Eisner. We're looking at a potentially grim time for renters very soon. As of October the 1st, California's legal moratorium on evictions will start to expire. And it's not hard to see that the removal of tenants who are behind in their rent will follow soon after. Joining us now, Assemblyman Miguel Santiago. He represents the 53rd District, which encompasses downtown Los Angeles, East LA. And Miguel serves as the chair of the Assembly Select Committee for Los Angeles County homelessness. I got to ask you, this is such a big concern for so many people as this clock ticks down. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you want to tell people? I mean, there are people really biting their nails right now.
Well, the first step is apply. And housing is key, is where you go to apply. That's the first step. Second is that we put life rafts on this policy. So after the eviction moratorium is over, you can still not get evicted if you are in the process of applying. Even if you were served by your landlord, you have to demonstrate within 15 days that you're applying for the money set forth by the state to prevent you from being evicted all the way till next March. So we did think about that and put some guardrails on there.
But when the actual moratorium expires and somebody hasn't done something, then what?
They have 15 days immediately to go out and apply for Housing is Key dollars. And that's why we put that there. And that also gives us the opportunity to come back in December when we can introduce legislation to further extend. But the guardrails are there. So if somebody gets served after the eviction moratorium ends on September 30th, they have 15 days immediately to begin the process of applying for the dollars and demonstrate to the landlord that they're in the process, and that protects them until next March.
The two conditions to be able to avoid being booted out are?
Well, number one, it has to be COVID related, which is why you wouldn't be able to pay the rent. And second, you have to demonstrate that you're going after the dollars. But these monies also help small landlords. Let's be very clear about that. So the small landlords can also apply for the dollars in conjunction with their tenants to help them relieve that debt. And that would be 100%, both for the landlord and for the tenant.
The area you represent, downtown LA, East LA, how big of a problem is this in these neighborhoods, the constituents that you have?
Well, it's a huge problem. We have about 88% renters, give or take, in the district that I represent, second poorest district in the state of California. And the average median income are between 40 and 50, depending on what area in my district. And these monies are exactly meant to help those who are the lowest income, who are struggling the most. So this is a big deal for us, which is why we fought so hard to get it done.
Is there a day that goes by that you're not getting phone calls from your constituents?
Yeah, and in fact, I've been out there myself, knocking on doors and telling people about the services that we have. We are communicating via social media, via email, via phone calls, and old school knocking on doors to make sure that people know that these services are out there. That's been one of the biggest challenges, Hal, is letting people know that these services are out there and to apply. Housing is key. Go to the website now and apply.
Yeah, and I want to know more about housing is key, quote unquote, but you're putting it out on social media, you're knocking on doors, you're sending out emails, and yet still there's so many people that don't know what's going on. And why do you think that is?
Well, look, it's been a tough year and a half during a pandemic. And I think why people are struggling, sometimes it's hard to break through the noise and what people are experiencing on a day-to-day basis. If you had kids learning at home with distance learning, you had a struggle to get a job, your rent and your bills are lining up. It's been tough to break through. I mean, we just had a recall campaign where communicating to voters was difficult. We went through the census last year where we had the same obstacles. That's the bad news. The good news is the services are there, and we're hitting the sidewalks and making sure that people know that it's there.
You'd think that if people are facing the potential for eviction, that would be just front and center, right in front of their nose, and they'd be on the phone, they'd be doing whatever they could to make sure they don't end up out on the sidewalk. But apparently people just aren't getting the message. And so tell them a little bit about what Housing is the Key, or Housing is Key is. Sure.
Housing is Key is a website set up by the state of California where you can go on and take a look at whether or not you qualify for the dollars set forth by the state. And keep in mind, these dollars are meant for those who are at the lowest income level. So if you have not been able to pay your rent because it's COVID related and you fit within the qualifying categories, you could get 100% of your rent paid if you apply.
As we like to say in the news business, there are two sides to every story. So on the other side of this story, you've got the landlords, and they're screaming too. And so what are you doing for the landlords?
Yeah, well, these dollars are meant so the landlords can also apply to pay the tenant's rent. And it's really made that way to both protect the tenant and ensure that the landlords are doing all they possibly can to help that tenant as well. And ultimately that helps them, because if the rent is paid, the landlord can continue with their mortgage. So it works both ways in this particular case. And in fact, we partnered up with landlord organizations as well to get the message out, because it's in their best interest. But more importantly, we want to make sure that people don't get kicked out of their apartments when there are dollars available out there. So I remind everybody, yes, the eviction moratorium ends at the end of September, which is why we're telling people apply for the dollars. Apply for the dollars. Housing is key. And if you are served by your landlord, you have 15 days to apply for the dollars after the moratorium has ended. But this also gives us enough time to get back to the legislature and get back to work in December, where we're able to pass and introduce new bills. Exactly the same thing we did last year.
Okay.
We put a bill in place and got back to work.
All right, very good. This is a good place for us to end this segment. Assemblyman Miguel Santiago, thanks very much. Good to see you again. We'll have you back. And coming up next on Fox 11 News in Depth, every 10 years after the U.S. Census, legislative bodies all do a reshuffle to make sure the boundaries are drawn fairly. We take a look at how the LA School District is handling redistricting. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Fox 11 News in Depth. Redistricting plans are going on all across the country now that the census data is available to see where the population has changed. One of those jurisdictions being looked at are new boundaries for the LA Unified School District. So it's not just legislative, it's not just congressional, it's also the areas where school districts are. And joining us right now is Andrea Ambriz. She is the Commission Vice Chair for this redistricting committee, right? Kind of explain your position, kind of explain to us what it is that you will be doing with this data from the Census Bureau.
Thanks, Hal. Thanks for having us and raising this really important issue. Every 10 years, the City Council requires the Los Angeles School District boundaries to be redrawn. And our commission is tasked with creating a recommendation for the LA City Council to ultimately adopt maps on October 29th of this year. So 15 members, myself included, engage in conversation with the community to really understand what the needs and interests are and how we can best incorporate some of that feedback into our recommended maps.
Let's see if we can kind of understand what's going on with the map there that we're looking at. Basically, as the population changes, if it moves from this neighborhood a little fatter over to this neighborhood, that changes sort of how you redraw the lines, correct?
That's right. This is completely informed by the U.S. Census and the information and data that we've received from them. So currently, Los Angeles School District is the second largest school district in the entire nation. It has about 628,000 students. So collectively, with all of the schools included, about 1,400 of those in our district, we're going to be looking at the best way to reflect the diversity, to the best way to reflect the kind of real interest of the community. We have a couple of guidelines by which we follow. That includes how we can incorporate communities of interest, how we can ensure that our natural boundaries are considered, and most importantly, how we can ensure the contiguity of all of the district.
Maybe we should translate that a little bit just to kind of understand. What does that mean to the kids going to school?
That's right. What it means is making sure that locally they know that the schools that are within their district are similar. So they might share the same church, they might share the same culture, they might share some of the same languages. We have over 98 languages spoken in LAUSD alone. So what it really means, and not only for the students, but for the parents as well as the teachers, it really gives us an opportunity to hear the kind of real experiences that they all have together and try to reflect those into the maps that we create so we can actually incorporate those communities together within the same district. We have 7 districts currently, and we're going to be looking at, as you mentioned, shifting those and accommodating for the increased population numbers.
You know, when we think about redistricting, we often think about politics. And so the election of this person or the election of that party is that what we're talking about here as well?
That's right. These district maps and the recommendations that we make will in turn reflect the new boundaries for the LAUSD Board of Education, basically our district members. And they are represented solely by the communities that they serve. So this is an opportunity for parents, for students, for teachers to really consider how their community can best be reflected and represented by their elected representatives. Again, we have 7 of those districts that will need to shift in size. We've had about an increase of about 110 in our population numbers. That it does include, however, a potential undercount from the U.S. Census as well. So we're trying our best to incorporate the kind of real experiences on the ground. But These are people-powered maps, Hal. This is why we're really looking forward to the public providing their feedback and their input, attending some of our hearings to inform us about their interests on how to draw the maps.
I'm just curious. I know you're still kind of pouring through data, right? So I guess, do you see any trends? Do you have a sense that from 10 years ago, things have changed dramatically, or is it more subtly, or is it more moderately?
That's such a great question. We actually have seen an increase in the maps in particular areas of the community, specifically Southeast LA, Northeast LA as well. In its entirety, we represent almost all of Los Angeles City, but we also incorporate unincorporated areas of the city. So we're trying to accommodate and reflect the increased population numbers in those areas. So in total, we have to adjust our numbers to about 110,000 additional students for us to include into the current district. And that's why we'll be looking at shifting some of those districts.
Can you give a website or someplace where people can get more information on when hearings will be held?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, and we'd love to invite individuals to visit our website. That's at redistricting2021.lacity.org/LAUSD-RC. And on that website, individuals can see not only the recordings of our hearings, but also our minutes. We will also be presenting some draft maps on September 29th. So this is really a great resource for the community to see.
Sounds like you've got a monumental effort there. Good luck with it. We'll look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you, Andrea and Breeze. And we'll have more on Fox 11 News In Depth right after this. Don't go away. And finally, if you haven't already, please check out my podcast. It's called What the Hell? It's available wherever you subscribe to podcasts, or just go to whatthehellpodcast.com. Well, that's it for this week's Fox 11 News In Depth. Thanks for joining us. And as you go, we'll leave you with some futuristic wonders, robots at a conference in Beijing. Have a great week, everybody. See you next time.